Welcome to CivilNet. My guest today is Matt Hulse. He's a filmmaker from UK and he's taking part in the British Film Festival taking place here in Yerevan. Welcome to CivilNet.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us.
A pleasure.
Matt, you are here taking part in the 12th annual British Film Festival that's being organized by the British Council and the UK Embassy in Armenia. First of all, is this your first trip to the region, to Armenia?
It is, yeah.
It is your first trip?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm sure we'll have a lot to talk about in that regard if you've had some time to look around the city. But I want to talk to you, before we talk about the film festival and the workshops that you're going to be doing here, about a film that you made called Dummy Jim. And to be honest, I hadn't heard of it, but I watched the trailer and I was astounded by the story, which is about a deaf man, a factory worker, who set off on a journey to one particular location and ended up somewhere far away from that location. Why don't you tell us the story of Dummy Jim?
Okay, well, Dummy Jim, that's the nickname for a man called James Duthie, and he was from a small fishing village in the very northeast of Scotland in Aberdeenshire. And in 1951, he got on his bicycle and he set off for Morocco.
Which is in the opposite direction.
Which is in the opposite direction, exactly. He was going south, he was going towards, the sun. And various things happened which meant he had to rethink his journey and his original goal. And eventually, he ends up in the Arctic Circle, which is at the in the north of Norway. And yes, and then he kept the journal and he wrote his journal into a book which he self-published, and it's called I Cycled into the Arctic Circle, which is a really nice title in itself, but I find it funny that he admits to heading for Morocco, then has this turnaround, and then calls his book the title that suggests that was his intention all along. Right. And that's something that appeals to me.
Yeah, because as a filmmaker, you are a storyteller. You tell stories that have global resonance, that speak to what is sometimes our humanity, our curiosity. James Duthie embarked on this journey in 1951. You were born much after, I'm assuming. How did you come across his story? Is it a well-known story?
Well, it is now. Well, it's getting more well-known. What happened was my mum sent me a copy of the book. She was working in a second-hand bookshop on a small island off the west coast of Scotland. And she found this little book and she sent it to me as a gift. And put a little note in there saying, do not feel obliged to do anything with this story. I
gotta love your mom, because she kind of obliged you by saying that.
I know. I realise that now, but the thing to bear in mind is this was in 2000, so it's actually been a 12-year process to get this to screen. And a lot has happened on the way, a bit like James Duthie's own journey. But it was really pretty soon after reading a few pages, I thought this could make a really interesting film. And one of the things that really appealed to me was that I realised that there was a way to adapt his book that would make a very visually led film.
Yeah, because I was reading about you, and they said that it was from the Scottish Arts Council, that Matt Hulse's work is characterised by surreal humour, timeless imagery, non-verbal, visual storytelling, and rich, visceral soundtracks. Yeah. So you like more than conversational vocabulary to show your story through.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think the root of that is that my original training was as a visual artist. So I've discovered filmmaking through an interest in photography, so image, and an interest in music and sound, and additionally an interest in performance. So I started filmmaking as a way to combine and record those things. So my way into filmmaking hasn't been through screenplay or
right.
storytelling. I've never been someone who's thought, I want to tell the story of. You know, it's about working with the medium, the visual medium and the sonic medium.
Right, and your process is very collaborative, right? And the one thing that really sparked my interest was that somebody had said that the film is very beautiful and utterly bonkers.
Yeah, I consider that a great compliment.
Yeah, I would too if I were you. So James Duthie, or Dummy Jim, that was his nickname, he was then tragically killed a few years afterward in 1965, I believe.
That's right, yeah. By that time he had bought himself a little motor scooter, and he was doing amazing trips. I think his last trip before he was killed went to something like 18 different countries. And based on some home movie footage that we discovered latterly of his, he got as far as eastern Turkey. He maybe even was in Iran. We're not sure.
Maybe he was even in Armenia.
He may have been. I mean, it's something that's quite extraordinary. And he just was obviously just a born traveller and a really natural communicator. Otherwise, how would he be able to negotiate his way?
Right.
And I think,
and for very few for a very small amount of money, he was able to travel. Right?
Yeah, well, his you have to bear in mind 1951 Northeast Scotland fishing community is it's quite a poor, tough community, and he would have, in addition to that, he would have been somewhat peripheral to the main community
because of his disability.
Yeah. But he had a strong interest in education, so he was. It's an unusual thing already that he's writing in English and publishing a book. That people sort of forget that's quite extraordinary in itself, regardless of where he travelled. Just to be literate would have been unusual.
That's interesting that you say that. Yeah. I didn't think of that actually.
And there's an additional level there which really interests me is his use of English. Actually is quite peculiar. So there's some things there in the book that are sort of unintentionally slightly comical. His language is a little stilted, and he's also writing in a way that's he's trying to write properly, which comes across in a strange way. And all of that, I love language and the difference in language and where translation doesn't quite work, and you get humor and so.
That's right. Well, I was going to ask you how we ended up in the Atlantic Circle, Arctic Circle. Sorry, but I'm going to leave it because I want to go and see the film, and I want our viewers to see the film that's going to be screened here during the British Film Festival, and it's won a number of awards. But I also want to talk to you about the workshop that you're leading at the Tumo Center for Creative Technologies, which is this phenomenal facility here in Yerevan.
Yeah.
What are you going to, and it works with children, I think, between the ages of 13 and 18, if I'm not mistaken. So what kind of workshop will you be leading with the kids here?
What we're doing is I've asked the students to make a 60-second long film. Okay. And I've asked them to limit themselves in a number of ways in their creative process.
Well, 60 seconds is pretty limiting.
It's already limiting, yeah. So I've asked them to work with their mobile phones. Some of them are already, I can see they feel a bit resistant to it. They're saying, but can't we use the fancy cameras? And I say,
because we have the fancy cameras, please.
But the point of the workshop is to focus on ideas, concepts, to really think about the value of the content and the structure and the way of approaching an idea, because you can have the most expensive technology in the world, but if the ideas aren't there, then it doesn't matter. And technology is obviously always developing, so the tools will always change, but it's the ideas that count. And yes, and then I've also given them what I've called triggers, so they each have 2 words picked at random that I prepared. So they have these sort of starting points which I've asked them to include in their films. And yeah, we had a good session looking at some examples of short filmmaking. And my emphasis has been on, again, visual storytelling, working with sound.
Music.
Some music, also like one-shot concepts, so to avoid the need to edit. Also, you do the edit just in the phone. And hopefully that will, it's a sort of a bleak way of looking at overcoming challenges and saying that challenges are not problems, they are actually gifts to help you focus your creativity. So hopefully that will equip them in a way that's, it's a making process rather than a storytelling, writing process.
Right, so that they understand the process and then later. So are they running their ideas by you, or they have free reign to pick the subject and the content? And
Well, with any luck, they've been furiously filming the last 24 hours.
Oh, okay.
And I've got a session this afternoon to catch up with them and see where they're at and if anyone needs any help or help guide things.
Yeah, well, I'm sure it will be a fantastic experience for them because, we tend to be verbose, and in Armenian language is a very heavy language. It's very old, sometimes archaic, so it's very difficult to be communicative and be fast and to tell a story. That's why Twitter doesn't work in Armenia, because it's 140 characters isn't enough for us half the time. So that would be, they often say that the hardest thing for writers to be able to write in very simple terms.
Yeah,
that's appealing.
That's very true. Yeah. Well, maybe Armenia should develop Twitter too, which has 300 characters.
Yeah, maybe there you go. Or we'll design an app and then sell it to Google. So this is your first time in the region, in the region, right? Not only in Armenia. So how far east had you come before?
Gosh, not terribly far. I was in Turkey briefly on a holiday.
On a holiday? Yeah, it doesn't count if it's a holiday. Now it's a working trip. And have you had some time to understand or to get a sense of the city?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, my first films actually were sort of travelogue films. So I love to just meander and explore and take photographs. And I use now quite a lot is Instagram to do still photography and sort of report to the world, if you like, my journeys. So I'm very happy just walking around and finding things by chance and accident. Although I did go to the Cascade complex, which is amazing.
It is, isn't it?
But I'm very, I'm hoping to see some of the museums as well. But I get a lot from just hanging out, going to markets, going to restaurants, bars, and things like that. Yeah,
that's how you sort of put your finger on the pulse of how the city is, yeah. Well, Matt, thank you so much for taking the time. I know you have a very, very busy schedule with the festival and the workshop that you're leading. We look forward to following and seeing what other new projects, exciting and, provoking films that you'll make so that we can follow.
Okay,
thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Thank you for watching CivilNet. I'd like to remind my viewers that my guest was filmmaker Matt Hulse. Stay with CivilNet.